Hey guys, don't worry, you haven't tuned into dumbbelltraining.com. No, not at all. Actually, what I'm doing is I'm trying a little overhead pressing with dumbbells because I can now. Yeah, after doing a long time training with bands, doing overhead presses, I've been able to train my shoulders to stabilize, especially my scapula, and I've now been able to return back to doing some overhead pressing after years of lifting heavy weight and doing a lot of dumbbell training and dead weight training. My shoulders really took a beating, and for a while I couldn't do a lot of overhead stuff. I've got pretty healthy shoulders, knock on wood. All right, I want to keep them that way. So periodically I'll do some dead weight training overhead, but mostly it's band overhead presses. Why do band overhead presses work better than dead weight? Well, I want to take you through a little bit of concept and show you a little bit more about overhead pressing with bands, then show you why I think it works better and why it might be a better option for you. Now, I'm not saying dead weight is bad. What I'm saying is dead weight causes us to have to lift in a certain way. Bands allow us a little bit more freedom to modify the range of motion, which I'll show you in a little bit. But first of all, let's take a look at dumbbells. You know, when you're doing overhead presses, you can go ahead and do neutral overhead presses, but what you're going to realize is in order for me to push the weight overhead, I've got to stay in a nice vertical vector. I can't get out here because if I get out here, that changes the gravity influence and it becomes a much more challenging exercise. So if I'm going to push overhead, it's going to have to be right underneath the weight. All right. What that does is it creates a line that I have to follow that is more susceptible to my shoulders possibly being impinged, especially my rotator cuff. Now, let's take a band. I can step on the band, okay, and position it, same as I usually do. When you take the band and do an overhead press, one of the things I think that people do is they get too narrow in their grip and they get in here. So now what happens is they get the same effect when they get up over top as with the dumbbell. They can't get out of that vertical plane that I like to have them sometimes do, because that goes ahead and puts a little bit less demand on their shoulder. So the first thing is make sure the thumbs go underneath, make sure the hands go over top, fingers go over top, and make sure you get into that shoulder position. I want the band out here, my hands out here. Now what I can do is I can engage the scapula by simply putting a little pull on the band right there. Now when I go to push overhead, I can push apart a little bit. Now by pushing apart a little bit, it puts me in a more scapular plane, much more comfortable on my rotator cuff, typically much more friendlier on my rotator cuff. So that's the key between band pressing and dumbbell pressing or dead weight pressing, is you can create that little scapular plane motion that I think is a little bit more comfortable on most shoulders and allows you to start pressing early. The other thing I think that happens with bands is the rubber, the elastic component of it, allows you to preset the scapula by putting a little pressure out on the band. That sets the scapula, it's stabilizing it. Now what I can do is go up overhead. When I get to the top, I can press apart and set the scapula. Plus, the resistance is going to be greater at the top than at the bottom, so I can get a little bit of momentum started, and when I get to the top, I really can work on engaging that scapula to give me good peripheral stabilization. Now the key is when you're up overhead, this is something that I didn't emphasize a lot early on in my band training. Got to keep that rib flare down, keep that lumbar spine from going into extension. We can see the rib flare. So if you see the rib flare, you can assume the lumbar is starting to extend. Let's keep the rib flare down. So what I like to do is get people in this position. Hey, set that butt, draw those abdominals in a little bit, and let's press over top. And let's keep that rib flare from flaring out and getting into that big lumbar extension, anterior pelvic tilt. Instead, we're going to draw that butt in a little bit and stabilize right over top to really protect that spine. Control it down, keep a little tension on the band, touch the rib cage or the clavicle, and then drive it back up and hold. Set, bring it back down, control. Touch the collarbone, explode it up and set. And make sure that when they get up over top, they get their head through, they really get the band behind them and they lock that out. So many people want to push and keep it anterior. Get it up and get it overhead to really engage that scapula. So there are some finer points about overhead pressing that I think will help you. Now the key is take the right size band, start training it with the size band that works best for you, get that scapula to really start stabilizing well, And I think you might find that you can start doing a little overhead pressing with bands much more comfortably with dead weight. Take a look at it and see what you think, but I'm hoping that that's going to help you out.